Thank you very much. Welcome back from lunch. I believe that we are living in the most amazing age in all of human history. We have seen the greatest amount of change that we've ever seen in any epoch just in the last 20 years, and the next 20 are going to be even more amazing. I'm sure many of the previous speakers have talked about it. I'm specifically going to talk about organizational preparation, but before I do that, let me lay a little bit of a foundation. I'm going to move through this fairly quickly. Just as more background, I do research at UC Berkeley with the Jacobs Institute for Design. I'm working on my doctorate. I have positions at Singularity University. Hi, Randy. I'm an associate at the Institute for the Future. My friends from SABIC are here. I'm an advisor in advanced manufacturing. I advise various startups. That's stuff about me. I've also written a couple of books. So here are the four things I'm going to go through. Exponential trends, just very, very briefly, because I believe that they've been covered before, or you should be aware of them. Then I'm going to talk about 10 innovation strategies, dynamic exponential organizational capabilities, and then specifically organizational efforts. So again, this is focused primarily around the changes that are going on, how it impacts an organization. I'm also going to mention on the side note some of my friends from the maker movement who came out of various spaces, maker spaces and innovation centers that have very rapidly developed products and launched them into commercial enterprises in very short periods of time. So this is my friend Jim McKelvey. He's the co-founder and actually inventor of Square, the little white dongle that goes on an iPhone or a Google phone and enables you to do a transaction. What most people don't know is when Jim went in with Jack Dorsey to see the top 10 smartest investors on the planet, is they were initially turned down. That's right, the smartest investors on the planet turned down a company that 4 years later had a $3 billion IPO. But what they did is they went to a center of excellence, a makerspace, learned how to use the tools, developed a prototype, and about 4 months later went back to see those investors and raised $10 million just like that. They then went on to create Square. This is the type of rapid innovation that we are facing and that will occur. And I'm going to give you a number of examples as we go through. So there are lots of accelerating technologies. This comes straight from my work at Singularity University. They've identified roughly 12 areas. If you haven't been to one of their executive programs, you should definitely go. They've got a nice one in Copenhagen. You can go to Palo Alto. I highly recommend it. I don't get paid for that pitch. It's really important to understand the core technologies. So of course you've got AI and robots, biotech and bioinformatics, computers and networks, energy and the environment, medicine and neuroscience, nanotech, and digital manufacturing. And I am not going to go into a 5-day course on this. I just highly recommend you go do those. Many of these, of course, are mentioned or talked about explicitly in the 2030 plan. And there's a reason for it. These are the technology drivers that are changing the world. The question is, how do you capture them and how do you use them in your organizations? That's what I want to talk about. But before we do that, I love this because there was an expert that came in, and again, this is from Singularity. There was an expert that was hired by the automobile companies to estimate when 500,000 electric vehicles would be created in a year. So 1 year, 500,000. And that industry expert in 2005 came back and said, by 2040, we will be producing 500,000 electric vehicles. And of course, Elon Musk came along, and this chart is actually old. The objective, I believe, is to hit 500,000 by the end of this year. I think he's going to miss, but he'll hit 500,000 next year. Why did these companies miss it? It was because of these exponential changes that they weren't prepared for. So the core are these exponential technologies. Let's keep moving. Here are the top 10 innovation strategies, according to my friend Jeremiah Ouyang out of Palo Alto, that corporations use to be able to innovate. And these are force ranked order. He talked to like 54 different companies, talked to their chief innovation officers and so forth. So we have dedicated innovation teams. And I trust some of you are doing that now. They have innovation centers of excellence. And by the way, these are force ranked top to bottom. So the second strategy is innovation centers. An entrepreneur program. Open innovation platforms, hackathons and so forth. I'm going to pause on open innovation. 50% of all innovations that are successful in a market come from the customers and your heavy users. 50% of all successful innovations come from not the corporation, but from outside of the corporation. What percentage of your R&D budget is being spent on external efforts? 3%? 5%? If you're spending 10%, you're in the top tier. Most organizations are not spending anywhere near enough time and effort on reaching out deeper into their community of users. And this fits into design thinking, where you talk to the customer. And this is research that's been, it's almost 20 years old now. It's Henry Chesborough out of UC Berkeley is one of the leading lights. His core article just hit 70,000 citations from other folks that were referencing it. Then we have innovation excursions. Come on out to Silicon Valley. You've got to see it. Go to Europe. By the way, we call these petting zoos, because nothing happens. The trick is to make sure that there's some actionable items that come out of it on your way back. Innovation outposts. This is where you actually put an innovation center in a key city. Whether I don't care where. New York, San Francisco, Shanghai, Austin, great city. Technology, education, and university partnerships. I think a lot of people do this fairly well. External accelerators, startup investments. There were more than 275 Fortune 2000 companies that have started venture capital funds internally last year. 275 that joined this bandwagon in the last 12 months. You need to do this well, by the way. You don't just stand up a venture capital group. There are multiple strategies for making it work, and you'll want to do that well. And then startup acquisitions. This is a poorly understood and often overlooked strategy. One of my other clients, as I mentioned, is Sandvik. Sandvik is a manufacturing mining company. They're about $10 billion in annual sales. They decided to do a digital transformation and a digital revolution, and they brought the lead from their Innovation Center of Excellence. They made him a president of an area, and they gave him, get this, it's a $10 billion company, a $5 billion checkbook. His objective, and the CEO's and the board's objective, is to double the size of that company in the next 5 years. And they're doing it primarily through very strategic acquisitions, startups in the technology space. He has a very articulate strategy. He knows exactly where the gaps are in the overall ecosystem, and they're going out and they're buying these companies ahead of people who should be buying them. He's already spent, I can't say exactly, let's just say over $1 billion. They've acquired 5 companies. 18 months ago, he had 7 people that reported to him. He now has an organization of over 400. And that doesn't count the acquisition he did 2 weeks ago that I don't know the size of that company. These are serious strategies for serious companies who have identified the holes that are being created by these exponential technologies. This is so of those 10, I'm going to hit a couple of them. These are innovation centers of excellence. Cortex Innovation Center in St. Louis. It's about 250,000 square feet. The bottom story is open access. Unternehmertum is connected to the university, the big university outside of Munich. This was funded mostly by BMW. So often you'll have a university in partnership with a major corporation that will do this, and then the Jacobs Institute, where I'm an entrepreneur in residence, they've got about 120,000 square feet, all the tools you need to make anything on the planet, tied with the information technology teams inside of Berkeley. These are, again, fairly large, very well staffed, and focused on helping to capture the knowledge that's being created on these exponential curves. And I'm going to talk a little bit about exponential organizations. This comes from my friend Salim Ismail. This is Exponential Organizations. He's launched a company. It's called Exponential Organizations. EXOs can be hired from him to walk through this particular idea. Now I'm going to change it a little bit. He calls these attributes. I call these capabilities. Coming out of the academic research, one of the things that is important for agile companies or companies that are leveraging new capabilities is they create new capacities. And it isn't necessarily across the entire organization. It can be in different places. The key is to have these capabilities and then to be able to tap into them. So you can start relatively small. You can start building these capabilities in one of the divisions or out of one of your centers of excellence or through your startups. The key then is to network that within the rest of the organization so that when they decide that they need one of these capabilities, it exists and they don't have to build it from scratch. And Salim's got some great work. You should go online and take a look at it. He talks about staffing on demand, community in the crowd, algorithms, leveraged assets, engagement with your customers as well as your employees, interfaces, dashboards, experimentation. So building a culture that enables experimentation or building zones within a company that allows for experimentation is critical. Autonomy, being able to drive the decision-making further down into the organization, and then social. I'm going to talk about a couple of these attributes. You should buy the book. You should send a team to meet with Salim and learn about exponential organizations. This is a critical insight that between 70 to 84% of all digital transformations fail. 70 to 84%. They do not fail because of technology. They fail for two primary reasons: poor execution and a poor cultural fit. I would argue that the cultural fit is the reason that there's poor executions, because these are large companies. They wouldn't exist unless they knew how to execute, but because they didn't have a culture ready for these kinds of efforts, it tends to fail. And there are strategies for creating the culture. To start with, it's exposure to these ideas, as well as commitment from the senior management team. I'm going to talk about a couple of these, don't have time to go through all of them. This is a company that I'm advising. It's called TechBuddy. It's a staffing on demand company. Most importantly, they have a platform that enables others to be able to staff on demand, meaning that you can buy this platform, plug it into your ecosystem, and create a staffing on demand solution for your company or for your ecosystem. And this team has built an amazing platform. It's mobile based. You can see everything on your mobile. It's got dashboards so that you can see what kind of orders that you're getting and who's fulfilling it. It has layers behind it. So if you're using freelancers, you want to upgrade their skills. He's built on the back end the ability to upgrade their skills. There's a rating system that goes both ways. Their staff is rated. The staff rates the customer. This kind of transparency, as we talked about dashboards earlier, is absolutely critical. But this is a fascinating way of engaging the youth at a low rung, giving them an on-ramp to better jobs, and doing it in a way that creates positive feedback loops for you, for your customer, as well as for the tech buddy. Now, he started in technology, so he's calls it Geek Squad for Uber, or Uber for Geek Squad, something like that. But it's actually, I think it's actually quite a bit bigger. This is another one. DARPA did this one. They wanted to demonstrate to the US military that it doesn't take $10 billion and 5 years to build a platform. So this was a desert fighter vehicle, and it was created in 6 months for less than $5 million. And it leveraged the crowd to be able to get it done. Remarkable things can be done when you embrace these kinds of technologies. I'm going to switch now a little bit. According to Schmidt at Google, and he's one of them, and this is the conservative number, he says you should be spending 70% of your money on the ongoing operations, 20% on product extensions, and 10% on what they call 10X programs. There are others who are saying it should be 50%, 25%, and 25%. I dare say there are few organizations that are adhering to this rule. It's absolutely critical that the funding is released to be able to capture both the savings and the potential growth. These kinds of programs, particularly the 10X programs, should be able to completely fund themselves and return an enormous amount of capital to the company. But it requires a different way of thinking. You can't just stand up a 10X program. You've got to go through the fundamental assumptions. You've got to seed the organization with other people who believe in them. You can't expect, I love this, we would send a team to Palo Alto. They would stay for 6 months. They would launch a product inside of 6 months. Usually the home company couldn't do it in less than 2 years. And they developed a pace of analysis, a pace of engaging the customer, a pace of making decisions, and a pace of launching and getting the product out there that was foreign to the corporation at home. And so when they brought them home and dropped them back, they couldn't get anything done. If you're using a normal stage-gated new product development process, it's going to take you 3 months to have the first meeting. Your second meeting is going to be another 3 months after that. We have companies that are launching inside of your decision cycles. And once these teams have been exposed to it, that's what they want to do. And they come back home and they can't because the organization hasn't been trained. So we need HR on board. We need finance on board. We need purchasing. We need logistics. We need operations. You can't just send the innovation team out to do something. You can't just send them off-site to do something and expect it to come back. You need to infect the entire organization. You can start small, but we need a small team in every major functional area that has been exposed to this. It's got to have senior management support. And if it does, this kind of rule, 70, 20, and 10 will work. Now, technically, there are also some differences, right? A service company is different than a product company, and that's very well known within the academic literature. Internal optimization is different than external optimization. So each of these requires slightly different strategies, but they're fairly well known. It's a 70, 20, 10 rule. I strongly suggest that you adopt it, but only after you've chosen a path to expose the organization to this kind of thinking. So it requires a completely different way of thinking, significant shift. So exponential, agile, dynamic capabilities. These kinds of words should be just flowing off your tongue in HR, in IT, in finance, in operations and logistics, everywhere. A new focus on rapid change, 10X programs. We call them sprints, where you bring a team together for very short periods of time. You set very high bars of expectation, and then you fund them and release them and let them do it, often with a very much external focus. You need senior management and board-level buy-in. You need support from the CEO, the COO, the chief operating officer, the board. There is a direct correlation between the desire of the most senior managers and the effectiveness of digital transformation efforts. 4x. There's a 4-fold increase in the probability of a transformation working if you've got senior level support, air cover for making mistakes. Without it, you're going to be one of the 70 to 84% that fail. We've got to have the board and the CEO on board. You must energize, excite, and engage the employees, the stakeholders, and the customers. And this can be done. Change does not just happen. It is done, or it is done to you. You've got to choose to do it and go out and make it happen. And it's got to be both from the top and from the bottom. And the program I just described, where you send people on excursions and you bring in trainers and you visit Singularity and you bring in Salim, and you do that fairly broadly, and then you have senior management support driving it down from below, you increase your probability of success in capturing the massive values that are here. Likely it'll require an organizational cultural shift, cross-organizational training, exposure, and internal marketing to those teams. It does require a shift of resources as well. However, you should be able to fund this through savings, through cutting programs that don't fit, and through growth. Through automation. There's an enormous amount of waste in large corporations these days. You can shift those employees into new areas through some training. This doesn't have to be like, let's cut 30% of the employee base. No, you can save money in one area and focus that funding in another area. I've got about 4 minutes to answer some questions. No questions. Oh, we got one. And if there's another question lined up, we will have just a couple minutes.
Hello. Thank you, Mark, for the informative presentation. My name is Mudaffar. I'm based in Dubai. Just a quick question, but I'm not sure about the answer. Related to the culture. We know all of these efforts, the 10X program, the sprints. You mentioned that the organization should be agile and work in a dynamic way. But what are the practical, let's say, suggestions to organizations in this region they could do now to alter this culture?
Get the funding to do an excursion or two, get the funding to send some teams to Singularity, bring in Salim or some of the EXO coaches. That's relatively inexpensive, and that would begin to seed the organization with people who are starting to think in this new way. That could be done right away, and it wouldn't cost a whole lot of money. Larger, coming out of that, they're going to want to do a sprint where there are actually programs and funding available to go make something happen. What's nice, though, is the funding's not guaranteed. The funding is only done if the project teams come in with a great idea. But they always do. Great question. Anybody else? We have one there and one here. We got time for one question. Great.
Thank you so much for great presentation. Excuse me, please. Can you explain us, like the SME, like small business, how to use the platform, not cost for the SMEs?
This is a great time to be a small business. I would start with making sure that you've read Ray Kurzweil's book, that you've read Peter Diamandis' book, that you read Ishmael's book. Then you would choose an area that you're interested in going after, and then go after it. It's a different presentation, but everything that we thought we knew about launching a company in the last 10 years has fundamentally changed. Every key strategy, whether it's product development, research and development, marketing, finance, access to markets, influencing, those costs have been crushed. You can do almost all of them online in some way. Even on the hardware side, people don't know that Flextronics, Jabil, and PCH, 3 of the largest contract manufacturers on the planet, are ready, willing, and able to engage hardware startups. Literally, everything we thought we knew about startups has changed in the last decade. And with that, thank you very much.